let's learn Pleiade HC, the place to be to develop your skills and grow your potential. So today I wanted to make a specific video on placement because I'm getting a lot of questions and I think people are a bit confused on, who places whom and how it works in Switzerland, etc. So the first thing is that you do have professional placement agencies and they tend to be quite visible. They're usually international, so people know the names of Adecco, Manpower, etc., those international ones. Some of them are more local and Swiss, a little bit less known by the international worker, but they're out there and their job is really to work for their clients, to place someone with a client, and they get paid for that by the employer, and the employer usually pays about 10 to 15% of the salary. So it's good, but it's only good as you're placing the person, and there's a lot of steps that needs to take place before you can actually place an individual. You need to make sure they're available, you need to make sure that the resume matches the requirements, that they would understand the company culture, that they can interview well, and I'm not even saying all of the spiel there of what you need to have to please an employer. So you know very well, if you're looking for a job or you've looked for a job before, employers have very, very specific requirements. So it's a business, I would say, that's difficult for a placer, for a recruiter, because you have very demanding companies, not very many candidates that would fit the criteria and be available, etc. I think the 10 to 15% of the salary is reasonable for that. Now, you also have headhunters that are professionals, and their job is actually to find, same thing, the perfect person. Usually they only work with very hard to find profiles or executives because they're quite expensive. They will go through their network and they will put a lot of energy to find the right candidate, but it usually comes at a fee for the employer, and the fee tends to be quite high. I think mostly headhunters are used for very specific industries. I know in banking in Switzerland, they're known for that. So very specific skill set, hard to find profiles, and they do get paid a lot for that work. So that's the second type of activity around placement in Switzerland. The first people, the placement agencies, they also need to be regulated. So you need to have an authorization to place in Switzerland. Not everyone can do it. So it's leading me to my point number 2. Well, how come we don't have such a service like people placing me as an individual? Why not the reverse? It's a little bit complicated. And just by what I explained, the fees already, who can afford to pay the same amount as an employer does for a placement? If you do it the other way around, it would mean that the cost would be on the employee, who can pay 15% of their salaries to somebody, especially if you're not placing the person. So you would need to have enough people that would be willing to pay 10 or 15% of their salary to you to make it a business. So in other words, if I have, let's say, one person every 2 months that's willing to give me 10% of their salary, of their yearly salary, to find them their dream employer, that's not enough in terms of attraction and so forth. So basically, same amount of work, in my view, same thing, and not many people would be willing to pay so much money for having someone that places them. It would be a very hard cost to sustain, especially again for I would say up to the mid-manager level. That's a lot of money, especially if you're unemployed, maybe you have expenses, you're not getting unemployment. Who can afford to pay someone 10% of their yearly salary? So that's it. Just economically, the model is not viable. However, you do have agencies that are not private agencies. Not so much in Switzerland, even though you have a few. In some other European countries, there's maybe more funding towards this, but you can find some agencies that are more public service. So in other words, they work they get funded by the government in some shape or form, and they have programs. So they work with the government or the unemployment office, and they have a program to place people, and usually they get paid by the government. So it's a little bit of a different business model there. They don't have to ask for so much money from the individual, which again, in my view, it's not sustainable. So you work for basically an agency that's providing this kind of service. So here we're more in the social work, public service, which is not at all the direction of my organization. So I know some places who do it in Switzerland. They tend to be French speaking, and they tend to really focus on non-professional type of categories of employment. But just to summarize a little bit the economics. So that leads me to what I do, because I talked about what I don't do. So what I do is more help people with their career orientation. So things like, what do you want to do? Where do you stand right now in your career? What makes perfect sense for you? Is your resume and cover letter in line? Do you have a communication with employers? I also provide contacts, because I'm doing the step of giving you names of people that would be of value to you. So I'm giving you basically the tools to be autonomous, to find your dream job. So it's a little bit of a different business model there. I'm providing value in helping you find your dream job in terms of making you autonomous. And it's much more valuable, because it's not a one-shot thing where I'm placing you with an employer. I'm doing more of the larger global work around your profile for the long term. What kind of person are you? What kind of job do you need? And where to look. So I am helping in terms of market potential and what companies are in Switzerland, but I'm not placing. So I'm just making that difference there. So in my career package, I'm providing contacts, which is already, again, a huge step. So this package is available online. I will post the link below. It's 500 francs, which I think is a very reasonable amount based on the value you're getting from it. All the resources, I also have a lot of resources like, links of places to look. And, I think with all these tools, you are autonomous to not only find your next job, but find work, in the future, especially if you stay in Switzerland. You may need to look for another job a year later, if you get fired or if you lose your job. So I'm providing you autonomy, which in my view is even more valuable than just placing for a job. It's more the general aspect of who you are and giving you resources to be autonomous in placing yourself, which is even more valuable in the long term. You don't want to depend on others to find resources for you. You want to be able to build those own resources on your own. So I hope this was helpful. Feel free to ask me some questions. I'll talk to you soon.